Isabella was in the kitchen, surrounded by a mountain of post-it notes and travel brochures, her excitement palpable. Joe leaned against the doorway, coffee in hand, watching her with an amused smile. "So, we're really doing this, huh? Dominican Republic. Here we come," Joe chuckled, sipping his coffee. Isabella spun around, her eyes shining. "Yes, can you believe it? 2 whole weeks of sun, sea and dust," she grinned, walking over to wrap her arms around him. "It's been too long since we had us time, Joe." Joe kissed her forehead. "I know, babe, I can't wait. Just you, me and the beach. No work calls, no house chores, and most importantly, no." His words were cut off by the sudden ring of the phone. Isabella sighed, releasing Joe to answer it. "Hello." "Hey, Izzy." "It's me." Julia, came the voice from the other end, tinged with a note of loneliness that Isabella knew all too well these days. "Julia, how are you holding up?" Isabella's tone shifted to one of concern, her brows furrowing. You know, same old. Just ... lonely, I guess. Ever since the divorce, it feels like the walls are closing in on me." Isabella glanced at Joe, who rolled his eyes at the mention of Julia. He whispered, "Here we go again," but Isabella shot him a look that said, "Be nice." "Listen, Julia, we're actually planning a vacation to the Dominican Republic. Just a little getaway for Joe and me," Isabella started, hoping to steer the conversation away from pity. "Oh wow, that sounds amazing. Must be nice. Planning trips with your perfect husband." Julia's voice had an edge to it, a mix of sarcasm and hurt. Isabella winced. "Julia, it's not like that. We've been saving for this for ages. Plus, the kids are at camp, so we thought it'd be a good time." There was a pause before Julia's voice softened. "Yeah, I'm sorry, Izzy. I didn't mean it like that. It's just, I miss having someone, you know." Isabella sighed, her heart going out to her sister. "I know, Jules. And hey, if you want, maybe you could come with us? There's plenty of sun and beach to share." Joe's eyes widened in shock, and he mouthed, "What are you doing?" but Isabella ignored him, waiting for Julia's response. "Really? I wouldn't be imposing. I mean, I can pay my way and everything." Julia's voice perked up, a note of hope threading through her words. "Of course you wouldn't be imposing. Right?" Isabella turned to Joe, her expression pleading. Joe sighed, setting his coffee cup down. "Right, Julia, we'd love to have you join us. Wouldn't we, Izzy?" Isabella beamed. "See? It's settled then. Dominican Republic, the 3 of us. It'll be fun, Jules. A new start." "Thanks, Izzy. You're the best. Really, I mean it. And thank you, Joe. I promise I won't be a third wheel," Julia said, a genuine warmth in her voice. As they ended the call, Joe gave Isabella a look, a mix of love and exasperation. "This is going to be interesting," he said, wrapping his arms around her again. Isabella rested her head against his chest. "It'll be fine, Joe. It's just ... Julia needs us right now. We'll still have our time together, I promise." "Yeah, I know." Joe kissed the top of her head. "And who knows? Maybe this will be good for all of us." Isabella hoped he was right. She wanted this vacation to be a turning point, for them to reconnect and for Julia to heal. Little did she know, it was going to be a trip they'd never forget. The Dominican Republic greeted them with a blast of warm, salty air as they stepped off the plane. Isabella inhaled deeply, feeling the stress begin to melt away, while Julia immediately started complaining about the heat. "God, it's like walking into a sauna. How can people stand this?" Julia fanned herself dramatically with one of the travel brochures. Joe, always the peacemaker, chuckled. "You'll get used to it, Julia. Plus, the beach is going to feel amazing. Right, Isabella, trying to maintain the peace and excitement, nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely. Once you see the water, you'll forget all about the heat." As they collected their luggage and made their way to the shuttle, Julia's mood seemed to lighten, her complaints giving way to a reluctant excitement. "I have to admit, this place does look beautiful. Like something out of a travel magazine." "That's the spirit, Jules. Wait until you see the resort. It's right on the beach, and the views are supposed to be incredible," Isabella said, hoping to keep the positivity going. The resort was indeed as picturesque as promised, with lush gardens, sprawling pools, and the endless ocean stretching beyond. Julia's eyes widened as they checked in, her earlier irritability forgotten. Wow, this place is. Wow. Joe wrapped an arm around Isabella's waist, whispering, "Told you she'd come around." Isabella smiled, leaning into him. "Let's just hope it stays this way." Their room was a spacious suite with a breathtaking view of the Caribbean Sea. Julia immediately claimed the bed nearest the balcony, throwing her suitcase on it and rushing to check out the view. "Okay, I could get used to this." Isabella and Joe shared a look, a silent agreement passing between them. They both wanted Julia to enjoy herself, to find some happiness here after the rough year she'd had. After unpacking, they decided to explore the resort. The property was expansive, with multiple pools, restaurants, and direct access to a pristine beach. Julia's enthusiasm grew with every step, and even Joe, who'd been quietly supportive of bringing her along, seemed genuinely pleased to see her lightening up. They found a cozy beachside bar and decided to stop for drinks. As they sat down, Julia couldn't help but comment on the scenery. "I gotta say, this is pretty amazing. I'm starting to feel like this was a good idea." Isabella smiled warmly at her sister. "I'm just glad you're here with us, Jules. We wanted this trip to be special for all of us." "Yeah, cheers to that. To us, and to new beginnings," I guess. Julia raised her glass, a hint of her old spark in her eyes. Joe and Isabella joined her, clinking their glasses together. To new beginnings, they echoed. The moment was a rare one of unity and hope. Isabella felt a surge of optimism, believing that maybe, just maybe, this vacation could heal old wounds and bring them closer. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, they made their way back to the resort for dinner, the air between them lighter than it had been in a long time. But beneath the surface, Isabella couldn't shake a nagging worry about what the next 2 weeks would bring. She hoped the beauty of the Dominican Republic and the tranquility of the sea would smooth over any tensions. Little did she know, the real challenges were yet to come. The first few days passed in a blur of sun-soaked relaxation and exploratory adventures around the resort. Isabella and Joe found themselves slipping easily into the tranquil pace of vacation life, but Julia's presence was a constant, unpredictable element. One afternoon, as they lounged by one of the resort's pools, Julia's mood shifted like the tropical weather. She had been quietly reading a magazine, but suddenly slammed it down on her sun lounger. "Can you believe this?" Julia gestured wildly at the page. "Look at these models. Unrealistic beauty standards everywhere. No wonder real women feel terrible about themselves." Isabella, trying to remain diplomatic, offered a soothing response. "Yeah, it's a big issue. But you know, Jules, being here, away from all that, maybe we can just enjoy the moment." Julia scoffed. "Easy for you to say, Eyes. You've always been the pretty sister you don't know what it's like." Isabella felt a sting at Julia's words but tried not to let it show. "Jules, that's not fair. We all have our insecurities. I want us to have a good time here, together." Joe, sensing the rising tension, chimed in with a distraction. "Hey, why don't we take a walk down the beach? Maybe grab some of those fresh coconuts from the beach bar." Julia rolled her eyes but acquiesced, and they made their way to the beach, the soft white sand acting as a temporary buffer to their problems. It wasn't long before Julia's restlessness returned. They found a spot near the water, the ocean's rhythm calming. Yet Julia seemed unable to relax, her gaze wandering to the other beachgoers. "Look at all these couples," she muttered, bitterness creeping into her voice. "Must be nice to have someone." Isabella reached out, placing a hand over Julia's. "Julia, I know it's hard. But being here with us, I hoped it might give you a break from all that." Julia withdrew her hand, standing up abruptly. "A break? Isabella, look at you and Joe. Perfect little couple. How do you think that makes me feel?" Isabella stood too, her patience waning. "Julia, what do you want from me? I invited you here to be with us, to help you heal, not to compete or compare." Joe stood, positioning himself between the two. Okay, let's all just take a breath. We're in paradise, can't we just enjoy it? Julia turned on her heel, storming off down the beach. Enjoy your paradise, then she called back over her shoulder. Isabella made to follow, but Jo held her back. Give her some time, she's going through a lot. Isabella watched her sister's retreating figure, a mix of frustration and guilt churning within her. I know, Jo, but it's like nothing I do is right. I just wanted this trip to be good for us, for her. But it feels like we're falling apart. Jo wrapped an arm around her, guiding her back to their spot. We'll figure it out, we always do. As they settled back down, the sound of the waves offered little comfort to Isabella. She couldn't shake the feeling that the rift between her and Julia was growing, each passing day a test of their sisterhood's resilience. The rest of the day passed in uneasy silence, the trio navigating around each other's moods like ships in a stormy sea. Dinner was a quiet affair, and as they retired to their room, Isabella lay awake, pondering the fragile balance of family dynamics, her heart heavy with unresolved tensions. It was clear that the beautiful backdrop of the Dominican Republic couldn't mask the brewing storm between them. Isabella realized that if they were to salvage their vacation and their relationship, something had to give. But what and how remained questions she couldn't answer. The tension that had been building over the past few days reached its zenith under the sweltering sun of a late Dominican afternoon. Isabella, Jo and Julia decided to try some of the resort activities to lighten the mood, starting with a salsa class offered on one of the outdoor patios. The class started off fun, with the instructor's vibrant energy infectious. Isabella and Jo found themselves laughing and stumbling over their steps, a much-needed release. Julia, however, stood to the side, her arms crossed, her gaze distant. Come on, Jules. It's fun. Give it a try, Isabella encouraged, breathless from the dance. Julia shook her head, her voice laced with disdain. No thanks. I'd rather not make a fool of myself. Seems like you two are doing enough of that for all of us. Isabella's smile faltered, the jab striking a nerve. We're just trying to have a good time, Julia. Why can't you just join in? Julia's eyes narrowed. Because not all of us feel like dancing, Isabella. Some of us are going through real pain. Jo, sensing another argument brewing, interjected gently, Julia, nobody's saying you're not hurting. But we thought this could be a nice break for you, for all of us. Julia scoffed, turning her attention to the sea of laughing, dancing couples. Yeah, a nice break. I'm surrounded by reminders of what I've lost, but sure, let's dance it away. The instructor called for partners to switch, a temporary distraction from the mounting discomfort. As Isabella and Jo resumed dancing, Julia's presence felt like a shadow over their attempt at levity. After the class, as they walked back to their room, the air was thick with unsaid words. It was Julia who broke the silence. I need a drink, she declared, veering toward the resort bar. Isabella, tired and wanting to avoid further conflict, sighed. Maybe we should just call it a night, Jules. We've all had a long day. But Julia was undeterred. Fine, you go ahead. I'm not ready to be locked up in that room again. Isabella looked to Jo, seeking support, but found him conflicted, torn between wanting to keep the peace and standing by his wife. Julia, listen, why don't we all grab a drink together? Sit by the beach, Jo offered, playing the mediator. No, you know what? I'll go by myself. I clearly don't fit in with your perfect vacation anyway, Julia snapped, storming off towards the bar, leaving Isabella and Jo in her turbulent wake. Back in their room, the silence was suffocating. Isabella paced the floor, wringing her hands, while Jo watched, helpless. This isn't working, Jo, I thought. I hoped this would help us. But it's making everything worse, Isabella admitted, her voice cracking with the strain of holding back tears. Jo stood, enveloping her in a hug. I know, I know. We were trying to do the right thing. But maybe we need to just give her some space. Isabella nodded against his chest, the weight of her decision heavy on her heart. Maybe you're right. Maybe she just needs time. They decided to give Julia the night to herself, hoping distance would cool the heated emotions. But as they lay in bed, the sound of the ocean outside couldn't drown out their concerns for Julia and the palpable rift that had formed. The breaking point came unexpectedly in the early hours of the morning when a knock at their door jolted them awake. It was one of the resort staff, concern etched on his face. "Excuse me, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson? It's about your sister MS, Julia. There's been an incident at the bar." Heart pounding, Isabella and Joe rushed to the bar, where they found Julia, intoxicated and argumentative, being escorted out by security. The sight of her sister, so lost and in pain, broke Isabella's heart. "Julia, what happened?" Julia, tears streaming down her face, turned to Isabella, her voice a mix of anger and despair. "What happened?" "I happened, Isabella. I'm the problem, right? Just like always." The confrontation that followed was raw and revealing, years of unspoken grievances spilling out like the waves crashing on the shore nearby. Julia's pain, Isabella's guilt, and Joe's frustration collided in a maelstrom of emotions that left them all exposed and vulnerable. It was the lowest point of their trip, a stark reminder of the complexities of family and the hidden fractures within seemingly strong bonds. As they helped Julia back to The morning after the incident at the bar was marked by a palpable tension. The tropical paradise that had once promised relaxation and escape now felt like a prison of awkward silences and unspoken resentments. Isabella, Joe, and Julia sat at breakfast, picking at their food, the events of the previous night hanging over them like a dark cloud. Isabella broke the silence first, her voice soft but firm. "Julia, we need to talk about last night." Julia, looking haggard with dark circles under her eyes, barely lifted her gaze from her plate. "What's there to talk about, Izzy? That I'm a mess? That I'm a mess? That I ruined our vacation? Trust me, I know." Joe, ever the peacemaker, tried to intervene. "It's not about blame, Julia. We're worried about you. Last night, it scared us." Julia's laugh was bitter, devoid of humour. "Scared you? Welcome to my world. I live in that fear, that pain, every single day." Isabella reached across the table, trying to bridge the gap with her compassion. "Jules, we're family. We're here to help you, but we can't if you shut us out. What happened with Joe and me seeing you like that? It's not okay." Julia recoiled as if slapped, her walls going up instantly. "So what? You want me to pack up and leave? Is that it?" "No, that's not what I'm saying," Isabella sighed, frustration threading her words. "But something needs to change. This isn't healthy for any of us." The conversation went in circles, with Julia defensive and Isabella and Joe trying to find a way through to her. Eventually, Isabella made a decision, one that felt like the only option left. "Julia, I think it might be best if you take some time to yourself. Maybe go back home early," Isabella suggested, her heart heavy with the weight of her words. Julia stared at her sister, betrayal and hurt flashing in her eyes. "So you are kicking me out? Great. Just great, Isabella. When things get tough, just get rid of Julia, right?" "That's not fair," Joe cut in, his voice steady but firm. "This isn't about getting rid of anyone. It's about doing what's best for you, for all of us." The argument escalated until Julia stood, her chair scraping back loudly. "Fine, I'll leave. You got your wish. Enjoy the rest of your perfect vacation without me." Isabella reached out, tears in her eyes. "Julia, please." But Julia was already walking away, leaving Isabella and Joe in a stunned silence. The departure was arranged quickly, a silent drive to the airport with only the most necessary of words exchanged. As Julia checked in for her flight, Isabella tried once more to bridge the chasm that had opened between them. "Julia, I love you. I'm sorry it came to this," Isabella said, her voice cracking with emotion. Julia's response was cold, a protective barrier around her heart. "Save it, Isabella. Just take care of yourself." And then she was gone, leaving Isabella and Joe to return to the resort in a daze, the empty space Julia left behind a tangible presence. Back in their room, the silence was oppressive, the joy they had once felt about this trip now a distant memory. Isabella collapsed onto the bed, her sobs muffled by the pillow. Joe sat beside her, his hand on her back, offering silent support. There were no words to mend the hurt, no quick fixes for the deep wounds that had been exposed. The departure marked not just the physical leaving of Julia, but the closing of a chapter in their lives. The fallout was yet to be fully realized, but in that moment, Isabella and Joe knew that their relationship with Julia and with each other would never be the same. As the sun set on what was supposed to be a dream vacation, Isabella lay awake, pondering the fragile nature of family ties and the complex tapestry of love and pain woven into the fabric of their lives. The departure was a painful end, but perhaps, in time, it could also mark the beginning of healing. For now, though, all Isabella felt was the ache of loss and the heavy burden of unanswered questions. The following days passed in a blur for Isabella and Joe, each trying to process the tumultuous events that had led to Julia's early departure. The air of the Dominican Republic, once filled with the promise of relaxation and adventure, now seemed to echo with the remnants of their fractured family dynamics. Isabella, in particular, found herself caught in a loop of regret and confusion, replaying the arguments and the hurtful words that had been exchanged. On a particularly overcast afternoon, as Isabella sat on the balcony overlooking the grey, churning sea, her phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Logan, Julia's ex-husband. The sight of his name on the screen made her heart sink further. She hesitated before answering, not sure she was ready for another round of emotional turmoil. "Hey," Logan Isabella greeted, her voice weary. "Isabella, hi. I heard about what happened with Julia." Logan's voice was gentle, filled with concern rather than accusation. "Yeah, it's been rough. She flew back yesterday," Isabella said, not quite knowing how much to share. There was a pause, and when Logan spoke again, his voice was hesitant. "Look, I think there's something you should know. About why things ended between Julia and me." Isabella felt a knot form in her stomach. Part of her wanted to hang up, to avoid hearing any more painful truths, but another part of her needed to understand, to find some closure. "What is it, Logan?" It wasn't just the arguments or the growing apart. Logan began, his voice heavy. "I found out Julia was seeing someone else. For a while, actually." The revelation hit Isabella like a physical blow. Despite their issues, she had always seen her sister as the victim in her divorce, a narrative that Julia had certainly encouraged. "Are you sure?" she managed to ask, her mind racing. "Yes, I'm sure. I saw the messages, the photos. Confronted her about it. That's when everything really fell apart," Logan explained, the pain evident in his voice. Isabella sank down into her chair, feeling as though the ground had shifted beneath her. "I had no idea. She never said anything." "People often hide their pain in different ways, Isabella. And Julia. She's always been good at putting up a front," Logan said softly. The conversation moved to the awkwardness of navigating shared memories and the complexities of family relationships. Logan shared his perspective on Julia's actions, not to vilify her, but to offer Isabella a fuller understanding of the situation. As they talked, Isabella felt a mixture of emotions: anger at Julia for the deception, sadness for the pain both Julia and Logan had endured, and guilt for not having seen the signs earlier. "Thank you for telling me, Logan." I need some time to process this," Isabella said finally, her voice thick with emotion. "Of course. I just thought you should know the truth. For what it's worth, I hope you and Joe find some peace out there," Logan replied, his tone warm despite the circumstances. After hanging up, Isabella sat in stunned silence, the roar of the waves below mirroring the turmoil within her. She realized that the version of Julia she had been fighting so hard to protect and help was based on an incomplete understanding of her sister's life and struggles. When Joe found her on the balcony later, he could tell immediately that something had changed. Isabella shared the revelations Logan had provided, both of them grappling with the new layer of complexity added to their already strained relationship with Julia. "This changes things, but it doesn't change how we feel about Julia. She's still my sister, your family," Isabella said, a resolve in her voice. Joe nodded, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "We'll get through this, together," The revelations from Logan shed light on the dark corners of Julia's life that Isabella had been blind to. While they didn't excuse Julia's behavior or the pain she had caused, they offered a path to understanding and eventually forgiveness. For Isabella, the journey back from the Dominican Republic would not just be a return home but a journey towards acceptance and the hope of rebuilding the fractured bonds of her family. The revelations were a bitter pill to swallow, but they also provided the first step towards healing. In the quiet aftermath of their conversation about Julia and the revelations Logan had shared, Isabella found herself in a state of deep reflection. The ocean's constant roar served as a backdrop to her thoughts, a reminder of the vast and unpredictable nature of life itself. She and Joe spent the remainder of their vacation in a sort of liminal space, physically present in the paradise of the Dominican Republic, yet mentally and emotionally miles away, navigating the turbulent waters of their family drama. One evening, as they sat on the beach watching the sunset, Joe broke the silence that had enveloped them since the conversation about Julia. "Isabella, talk to me. What's going through your mind?" Joe's voice was soft, filled with concern. Isabella sighed, the weight of her thoughts apparent. "It's just everything with Julia. I feel like I've failed her as a sister. I was so caught up in trying to fix things that I didn't see the whole picture." Joe reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "You haven't failed anyone, Izzy. You did what you thought was best with the information you had. We both did." But was it enough? I mean, knowing what Logan told us, it just puts everything in a different light. Maybe if I'd paid more attention, asked the right questions, I could have helped her before it got to this point, Isabella countered, her voice laced with guilt. "Isabella, you can't carry the weight of Julia's choices on your shoulders. We all make our own decisions for better or worse. You offered her love and support. That's all you could do," Joe reasoned, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Isabella fell silent, considering his words. The guilt and what-ifs were a heavy burden, but Joe's perspective offered a glimmer of clarity. She realized that her relationship with Julia, while fractured, was not beyond repair. It would take time, patience, and a willingness to navigate the complexities of their shared history and Julia's recent actions. "You're right, Joe. I guess I just need to find a way to accept that Julia's journey is her own, and so is my relationship with her. It might never be what it once was, but maybe we can build something new from here," Isabella mused, her voice steadier now. Joe nodded, his expression softening. "Exactly, and I'll be here with you every step of the way. We'll figure this out together, like we always do." The conversation shifted then to lighter topics and shared memories, as they allowed themselves a reprieve from the emotional heaviness of the past few days. Yet Isabella's reflections continued long after they returned to their room, long after the lights were turned off and Joe's breathing evened out in sleep beside her. Lying awake, Isabella pondered the nature of forgiveness, of growth, and of the indelible bonds of family. She recognized that the path forward would not be easy, that there would be setbacks and misunderstandings, but also moments of connection and healing. The revelations about Julia had opened a wound, but they also presented an opportunity for genuine understanding and, ultimately, reconciliation. As the first light of dawn crept into their room, Isabella felt a sense of resolve settle over her. She knew the journey home would be the start of a new chapter, one in which she would strive to be more accepting of her sister's flaws, more open to the complexities of her own feelings, and more committed to the hard work of building bridges rather than walls. The reflection period in the Dominican Republic, while painful, had illuminated truths about herself, about Joe, and about Julia that Isabella could not unsee. Armed with this newfound understanding, she felt ready to face whatever lay ahead, knowing that the strength of their family lay not in perfection, but in their willingness to embrace each other, flaws and all. The return home from the Dominican Republic was bittersweet for Isabella and Joe. The sanctuary that had once promised escape now seemed like a stark reminder of the complexities waiting for them back home. The silence that filled their journey back was not awkward but contemplative, as both Isabella and Joe grappled with the revelations and the uncertain future of their relationship with Julia. As they unpacked their bags, the physical act of settling back into their home life mirrored the emotional unpacking they both faced. Isabella was the first to break the silence that had enveloped them since their return. "Joe, we need to figure out where we go from here. With Julia with us. Everything she said, her voice steady but filled with underlying tension. Joe, who had been quietly sorting through the mail that had accumulated during their absence, paused and looked at her. I know, Izzy, and I'm with you, whatever you need, but maybe the first step is just reaching out to Julia, seeing if she's okay, if she's open to talking. Isabella nodded, her mind racing with potential scenarios of how a conversation with Julia might unfold. I'm scared, Joe, scared of saying the wrong thing, of making it all worse. Joe crossed the room, enveloping Isabella in a hug. It's okay to be scared, but we won't know unless we try, and whatever happens, we'll deal with it together. Encouraged by Joe's support, Isabella decided to reach out to Julia the next day. She crafted a message, one that was open and honest, expressing her love and her hope for a chance to talk, to understand each other better. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. To her surprise, Julia responded quicker than she expected. The response was cautious but not closed off, a small window of opportunity that Isabella clung to. Joe, she replied. She's willing to meet. Just to talk, Isabella said, her voice a mixture of relief and apprehension. Joe smiled, squeezing her hand in reassurance. That's great, Izzy, it's a start, right? The meeting with Julia was set in a neutral place, a quiet coffee shop they all knew well. The initial greetings were awkward, the air heavy with unspoken words and emotions. But as they sat down, Isabella took the lead. Julia, I want to say I'm sorry for everything that happened in the Dominican, for not seeing the whole picture. I love you and I miss my sister, Isabella began, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. Julia looked down at her coffee, her defenses slowly lowering. Easy, I'm sorry too, for putting you and Joe through all that. I've been dealing with a lot, and I didn't handle it right. I miss you too. The conversation that followed was far from easy. There were moments of tension, of painful honesty, but also moments of laughter and reminiscence. It was the beginning of a long process of healing, of rebuilding the trust and closeness that had been damaged. As they left the coffee shop, Isabella felt a weight lift off her shoulders. The road ahead with Julia would be long and uncertain, but the first steps towards reconciliation had been taken. It was a new beginning, not just for her relationship with Julia, but for herself, for her understanding of family, forgiveness, and love. Driving home, Isabella shared the details of the conversation with Joe, who listened with a supportive smile. It sounds promising, I'm proud of you, of how you handled everything. Isabella leaned her head against the window, watching the landscape pass by. It feels like we're turning a new page, doesn't it? A chance to start fresh, to build something stronger. Joe reached over, taking her hand in his. It does, and whatever comes next, we'll face it together. New beginnings, right? Right, Isabella agreed, feeling a sense of hope blossom within her. The challenges of the past had paved the way for a future filled with potential. For Isabella, the journey back from the Dominican Republic had become a metaphor for her own journey of personal growth and reconciliation. As they pulled into their driveway, the familiarity of their home brought a sense of comfort. The experiences in the Dominican Republic, the revelations, and the subsequent reflections had all contributed to a deeper understanding of themselves and each other. Isabella and Joe, hand in hand, stepped inside, ready to face whatever the future held. The challenges of the past had not been erased, but they had been transformed into the foundation for new beginnings. A foundation built on honesty, forgiveness, and an unwavering commitment to each other and their family. In this moment, Isabella realized that the true essence of family. Months had passed since Isabella and Joe's return from the Dominican Republic, and the landscape of their relationships had transformed in ways they could never have anticipated. It was a late summer evening, and they were hosting a small backyard barbecue, a symbol of the new beginnings they had all worked hard to cultivate. As Joe grilled, Isabella set the table, her heart lighter than it had been in a long time. Julia was there, helping, a testament to the progress they'd made. The atmosphere was one of cautious optimism, punctuated by genuine moments of warmth and connection. Julia, handing Isabella a bowl of salad, broke the comfortable silence. Izzy, can you believe it's been months since ... Well, since everything. I feel like a different person. Isabella smiled, taking the salad. I can believe it. We've all changed, Jules. It's been hard, but ... It's been worth it. Joe, joining them with a plate of grilled vegetables, added, It's like we had to go through that storm to find our way back to each other. I'm just glad we're all here, together. The sentiment was echoed in the smiles and nods of agreement from Julia and Isabella. As they gathered around the table, the simple act of sharing a meal felt like a celebration of their resilience, of the love that had weathered the storm. Isabella, looking around at her family, felt a surge of gratitude. I think we've all shown a lot of courage. Facing our issues, working through them ... It's heroic in its own way. Julia, her eyes softer than Isabella had seen in a long time, replied, Yeah, it takes a lot of strength to confront the past and to forgive. But here we are. It's a new chapter for all of us. The conversation flowed freely as they ate, laughter mingling with the sounds of the evening. It was clear that while the wounds of the past had not entirely disappeared, they had begun to heal, leaving behind scars that told a story of forgiveness, growth, and unconditional love. As the night drew to a close, Isabella and Joe stood together, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. We've come a long way, haven't we? Isabella mused. Joe wrapped his arm around her. We have, and it's only the beginning. There's still work to be done, but I can't imagine doing it with anyone but you by my side. Isabella leaned into him, her heart full. With love, patience, and a little bit of courage, I think we can face anything. The journey through the darkness had led them to a place of light and understanding, a place where the bonds of family were stronger for the trials they had endured. The heroic conclusions of their story were not marked by grand gestures, but by the quiet strength it took to rebuild, to forgive, and to move forward with hope. Their story was a reminder that heroism comes in many forms, often found in the willingness to face one's own vulnerabilities and in the commitment to forge a path of healing and reconciliation. As the night settled around them, Isabella, Joe, and Julia each knew that they had crossed an invisible threshold, stepping into a future where the lessons of the past would guide them toward a brighter, more connected tomorrow. Let us know in the comments how this story has inspired you, or share your own experiences of overcoming adversity. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heart-touching stories like this one. Hit the bell icon to stay updated with our latest uploads. Your journey through the complexities of the human heart starts now. Remember, your story isn't over yet. It's just a new chapter beginning. Stay strong, stay inspired.